Careblazer, you totally surprised me. If I had made a bet on how I thought you would answer, I would absolutely have lost. I posted a video a couple weeks ago on how there is very soon to be available a blood test to see if you are at risk for Alzheimer's disease, because the blood test would be able to detect things like amyloid plaque and tau proteins, which are two hallmark pathologies that we look for to see if Alzheimer's disease might be present. I did this whole video and I asked, would you want it if it's available? If this blood test becomes widely available to anybody who would want it, would you want to get the blood test? And I would say 95% of you said yes. I did not see this coming. I would not have guessed it. So what I want to do in today's video is I want to share considerations to be thinking about before you undergo some sort of test like this. Do what you want with the consultation of your healthcare providers. This is not a video on whether you should or whether you shouldn't, but I thought it might be helpful to review some of the risks in getting a test like this. And the very last one is one of the most important risks that I think when it comes to our day-to-day experience, knowing whether or not we have this increased risk. Okay, so number one, a lot of the comments that people left saying, yes, I would want it because I would want to start making the changes needed to help. Well, that's so interesting because we know for sure the changes that would help us if we have dementia and we want to live a better quality of life, or if we're at risk for dementia and we don't want to develop it, we know what to do. I did a video recently on the 5 factors that we can all start engaging in to reduce our risk of dementia, even if you have amyloid plaques and tau proteins present in your brain. I'll link a video below in the description. You can download it, watch it. We all know that. So if we already know what to do to reduce our risk, whether or not you have cognitive impairment, we can do that now. We don't have to wait to be told we have these things present. We can just start doing the healthy things now. So that was really interesting to me. So that was one consideration to make. Whatever you think you would do health-wise if you had dementia, what would stop you from doing those things now? Number 2 was really more about people commenting on, well, I would want to get my financial affairs in order, legal paperwork, things like that. Why wouldn't we do that now as well? Genuine question. I really would love your feedback and comments on this video in terms of what you're thinking in terms of, well, why would we need to know what's going on to start making and putting our life planning in order and our future planning in order with advanced directives, power of attorneys, living trusts, things like that. Whatever we need to do to protect our assets and help our family that we leave behind, we can start doing those things now regardless of our genetic risk. That was number 2. A third consideration to think about before we were to undergo any sort of genetic testing would be possible insurance issues. So this is one of the reasons why I think this blood test isn't so widely available right now, is that if insurance companies got a hold and knew that you had this genetic increased risk for dementia, would they still cover you? Would they take away your coverage? Would it prevent you from getting other types of insurance like long-term care insurance? So there's some issues there that concern me. The other thing that I would worry about is if people, like we could get this test, let's say we could get it now, many of us are still going to be in the working field. If your employer had access or somehow found out that you had this genetic risk, would that impact your job in terms of being considered for promotions, being considered for certain projects? Would you get passed up more than other people? Now, ideally, they would never find out. But however, this is something just to consider, certainly would be on my mind. Another issue would just be how other people treat you if they find out. Now, this is true even if you have dementia. Sometimes it really is a personal decision on if you want to share the diagnosis with others, because sometimes people start to treat you differently. They might start to back away. There's so much confusion and stigma around dementia that they don't know what to do or what they're supposed to do or say, and so they just kind of sort of disappear at a time when we need the most help and support possible. So that's another concern. So the 6th and final thing that concerns me in terms of people wanting to find out whether or not they have this genetic risk is really more about the emotional impact and something called the NOCEBO effect. Have you heard about this? We've often heard about the placebo effect. This is really where we have positive expectations that something's going to work, so then we have positive results. Basically, every medication has to pass the placebo effect because it's a real thing. In fact, there are some medications that are prescribed that very barely pass the placebo effect, meaning a sugar pill that wasn't designed to do anything, it barely beat it, just because our mind is so powerful. And when we have the expectation that something's going to benefit us and we swallow that pill, it feels like it did something. And so we all of a sudden start to not only feel better, but our blood test results can come better. We can actually show objective movement in a good direction. The nocebo effect is the opposite. It's basically a negative outcome from a negative expectation. And get this, in 2018, a study by the American Geriatric Society actually took a look at people who were told they had amyloid plaques in their brain. They took these people, they had them do objective memory testing. So typical tests that somebody would get when they're undergoing dementia evaluation, they had these people take these tests. They told them that they had the markers, they had amyloid plaque in their brain, which is basically the results you would be getting if you took this blood test. And then they had these people fill out a subjective questionnaire on how they thought they were doing, subjectively, their own interpretation and perception of how their memory was functioning. The people who were told they had amyloid plaques in their brain, all of them perceived that their memory was doing worse, even though their objective measured tests did not get worse. It was simply because they knew they had amyloid plaques in their brain, they started to feel and think that they were doing worse, even though objectively they weren't. This is also a concern I have about people who want to move forward with getting the blood testing and what kind of negative effect they might feel doomed. They might feel like things are going to get worse. I have concerns about that because we know it's been well established in research that even if you have these plaques in your brain, it is not a guarantee you are going to get dementia. Absolutely not. There are people who have these plaques in their brain and they develop Alzheimer's disease. And there are people who have these plaques in their brain and they never develop Alzheimer's disease. Even more, there are people who don't have these plaques in their brain and they get Alzheimer's disease, even if they don't have them. So this is just a potential risk factor, just like smoking cigarettes is a risk factor, and just like eating unhealthy food is a risk factor, exercising is a risk factor. It's not a guarantee. So please keep that in mind. I am wondering if after hearing these 6 reasons to maybe have pause and consideration about getting genetic testing, does this change your mind one way or the other, or would you still move forward to get the blood test if it was available to you today? Let me know in the comments. I'm really interested in hearing your responses. And Careblazer, this is so important. Whenever it comes to any type of genetic testing, you might want to consider consulting with a genetics counselor before undergoing some sort of test like this. Absolutely, at a bare minimum, talk to your healthcare provider about the pros and cons of going through some sort of testing, like the blood-based testing for Alzheimer's disease, which will likely be available in the very near future. I'm also interested in hearing what other videos you'd like to hear from us so that we can put some of those videos together for you. Sending you so much love. If you want to work with me more personally and a group of amazing Careblazers, there's also a link to our care course, which you can check out below. And I'm also going to link that study I referenced about how people who found out they had amyloid plaques in their brain actually thought they were doing much worse than they were. All right, bye.
Also, Nico gets a belly rub for every person who subscribes from this video. So if you haven't already, click the red subscribe button. It's totally free, and Nico says thank you very much.